didn't mean to disturb you. The day I've had, I tell you. I've got your crazy Frenchman's flying machine at the store. You fancy playing the aviatrix tomorrow?
You know I'd do anything for you, Harry. So does this mean you're taking me flying? Someone might come in.
I don't give a damn.
I beg your pardon?
Oh, Harry, how could ya? That's him, Harry Gordon Selfridge, a true American rags-to-riches cautionary tale. This is the story of a man's meteoric rise to wealth and his catastrophic fall into financial despair, and all his scandalous life that happened in between those moments. This is the story of a man who would do anything for his wife, anything except remain faithful. A family man whose love for his children was outpaced by his reckless obsession with living the high life. A man who built a multi-million-dollar fortune in what seemed like a blink of an eye, and lost it just as quickly due to his love of gambling and, I won't say whores, but women of ill repute? Yeah, he loved them. Harry rarely turned down a woman who was offering herself to play the role of his mistress. So, ladies, hold on to your bonnets. Gentlemen, hold on to your fedoras, because this story about the rise and fall of Harry Selfridge is a tale of scandal, extravagance, and ultimate ruin. It's a wild roller coaster. So buckle up and let's get into it. But first, now, having a husband like Harry Selfridge sounds bad enough, but it could be worse. What if you had a man who was a total fake? I mean a romance scammer. I trust that no one here is gullible enough to fall for AI Brad Pitt, but what about a nice-looking silver fox who wants to connect with you on social media? A handsome man who sends you a private message to tell you how beautiful you are, and that he's a widower who wants a real relationship. That's where today's sponsor, Aura, can step in and help. The thing is, my target audience, women 55 to 64, are also the biggest target for romance scammers. Many of these women lose thousands of dollars to their fake online lovers, and it could happen to anyone. You probably know more than a few people who have been scammed. Last year alone, Americans lost over $12.5 billion to online crimes. And it's on us to protect ourselves. That's why I use Aura, today's sponsor. Aura monitors your bank, credit, and investment accounts for signs of fraud. If a scammer is trying to steal your money, Aura will alert you so you can shut them down and protect your finances. Aura will also continuously monitor the dark web and alert you if they find that your personal information has been exposed. To give yourself the protection that you deserve, go to my link, aura.com/tieshotmess, to try 14 days for free. It's up to us to protect our own data, and Aura will help you do just that. The link is in the description box and pinned comment. Now, back to Harry. Let's get into it by going back in time to 1858, where Harry Gordon Selfridge is born into poverty on January the 11th in the small town of Ripon, Wisconsin. His parents, Robert and Lois Selfridge, were originally a picture of mid-19th century American optimism. Robert Selfridge was a Union Army officer who had the appearance of a strong family man and patriot, everything that a woman would want in a husband, but that was just an idealistic veneer. Once the truth came out about him, it wouldn't take long for that veneer to crack under the weight of societal pressures. Here's the deal. Harry had 2 younger brothers, and while they were all very young, Harry's father, Robert, abandoned the family, leaving his mother, Lois, to raise Harry and his siblings alone. You can be sure that life in the 1860s was not easy for a woman who was abandoned by her husband. She would have been viewed as a failure, and left to rear her children alone, without financial or legal support. Abandonment was scandalous. Not only would Lois have been ostracized by her community, but so would her children have been. So she came up with a lie. She told everyone who would listen that her husband was killed in the Civil War. It was far better to be a war widow than an unwanted woman with bastard children. She and her children would have been seen as a shameful laughingstock and a charity case had it not been for her clever lie about her husband's honorable death. Instead, they gained community support, and thanks to the times they were living in, no one tried to fact-check her story because it would have been an inappropriate thing to do to pry into a widow's personal life in that way. But I can't help but imagine that some eyebrows were raised in scrutiny at her story, as she clearly struggled financially in the years following her husband's quote-unquote death. I mean, where were her war widow benefits? Why was her post-war situation so bad? But his father's act of desertion didn't stop Harry. But it did shape his life profoundly, instilling in him a determination to succeed and prove his worth in a world that had, from his earliest memories, felt precarious at best. Lois Selfridge was as prepared as she could be for taking on the world after her husband left her. She was fiercely independent, resourceful, and deeply committed to her children. Her resilience left an indelible mark on young Harry. She worked tirelessly to ensure that all of her sons received an education, often making sacrifices to provide them with opportunities that seemed out of reach for a single mother in post-Civil War America. And just as things were looking optimistic for the newly single mom, tragedy struck when her second-born child, Charles, who was just 2 years younger than Harry, died. His cause of death isn't recorded, but it happened in 1869 when the boy was only 9 years old, and illnesses like diphtheria, typhoid, and scarlet fever were adding big numbers to the child mortality rate. Then, just as life started to feel stable again, deja vu came in the worst way when her youngest son, Robert, took ill and died in 1876. His life was tragically cut short at the age of 13. The Selfridge clan was now down to 2, and it was starting to feel like they just couldn't catch a break. Now, I don't claim to know the inner workings of Harry's mind, but when I think about a lot of his adulthood decisions that seemed less than smart and negligent, I can't help but wonder if losing his brothers at such a young age left him with a sense of urgency about life, like thinking that he had to make the most of the time that he had, no matter the cost. Maybe Lois was affected the same way, but her future actions would be much more cautious than Harry's. At this point, when even many strong men would have given up on life, Lois didn't. She kept going and encouraged her only living child to dream big and impressed upon Harry Selfridge the value of hard work and self-reliance. She taught him to ask, what if? Supposing if XYZ happened. These lessons would become the foundation for his future success, but they would also spark a restless ambition that would drive him to dizzying heights and eventually equally dizzying depths. Even as a boy, Harry showed signs of the relentless energy and charm that would later define him. He was quick-witted and personable, traits that made him a natural leader, but he also possessed a streak of extravagance and a yearning for the finer things in life, a byproduct of growing up in poverty and hardship. Harry's early years were a constant reminder of what he didn't have, and this instilled in him a relentless drive to achieve the wealth and status that seemed so unattainable during his childhood. Here's how he worked his way up from earning $1.50 a week to becoming a multimillionaire. Lois Selfridge had to step up and work harder than most women of her era when her husband left her. So she took a job teaching at the high school in Jackson, Michigan, where they had to move. It wasn't glamorous, but it put food on the table. As for young Harry, he didn't sit back and let his mother carry all the weight. His summers weren't for lounging and playing with school friends. They were for hustling. He was the de facto man of the house, so he worked. He picked up odd jobs to stretch their meager income. His first gig? A cash boy in a dry goods store, earning a whopping $1.50 a week. Not exactly a fortune, but it made a difference for sure. By the time he hit 14, Harry was ready to leave school behind for his first real job. He and his mom needed the money, and spending 4 years waiting on a high school diploma wasn't going to get their bills paid any sooner. He applied for a position as a junior bank clerk in Jackson, and he got the job. He was pulling in $20 a month. Still, not a lot of money. It's like earning $500 today in 2025. But it's not bad for a kid who started with nothing and had very little formal education. Little did anyone know, this humble beginning would set the stage for one of retail's greatest rags to riches stories. First, there was a quick detour. Harry thought that he would take his chance with a military career. It was too late for him to have a prestigious career in academia, so the next best choice was to graduate from the Naval Academy. That was his mother's ambition for him, and he adopted it as his own. Unluckily for them, Harry didn't meet the height requirement, and he was rejected by a naval doctor for being a quarter of an inch too short. So, you already know that at some point in this story, Harry becomes a wildly rich man. He would often go around saying that he attained his business success by a bare quarter of an inch. That's clearly a nod to this Naval Academy rejection. Because he couldn't get into the Naval Academy, he was about to carve out a path to prosperity in retail. I want to point out that this appears to be a lie. As this story progresses, you'll see that Harry was a great storyteller and salesman who knew how to get people's attention and get them excited. Well, I like to tell stories too, but I also like to research. The required height for the Naval Academy was 5 feet and 4 inches at the time that Harry went for his exam. Before that, it was 4 feet and 10 inches. Harry was 5'5", tall enough to pass the height requirement. So this too short anecdote might have been one of his tall tales that he created to add to his lore and mystique. Or maybe he spent his life lying about his actual height and he wasn't 5'5" in real life. Either way, there's a lie in there somewhere, but this is by far one of the most innocent lies he ever told. Stay with me, because in a moment we're about to get to some juicier lies, like the ones he told his wife. Lies like, "No, honey, I didn't have sex with that showgirl." Anyway, Harry's next job wasn't just a job. It was the career move that changed his life forever. At the age of 21, Harry moves to Chicago. It's 1879, and the city is a booming metropolis and brimming with opportunity. It is here that he finds his first job at Field, Leiter & Company, which later became Marshall Field's department store, a name synonymous with luxury and innovation in retail. Harry starts at the very bottom, working as a stock boy, but he quickly demonstrates a flair for understanding customers and a knack for spotting opportunities his co-workers and even his superiors overlook. Marshall Field's isn't just a department store. It is a retail empire that prides itself on customer service and quality. Harry is thriving in this environment, absorbing the lessons of retail like a sponge. Marshall Field, the man himself, is the founder, and Harry Selfridge is watching this man's every move. He's observing how Marshall Field prioritizes the customer experience, and Harry begins to develop his own ideas about what retail can be. Make no mistake, just because Harry didn't finish high school or attend university doesn't mean that he didn't get an education. He's getting his MBA by stalking Marshall Field like a hawk. Field's famous adage, "Give the lady what she wants," resonates deeply with Harry, who sees the potential to transform shopping from a transactional experience into a pleasurable and even aspirational activity. Harry's charisma and creativity quickly set him apart. He's not just a worker who's putting in hours to get a check. No, he is giving value every day that he steps through the front door at Marshall Field & Company. It doesn't take long for him to gain the trust of Marshall, who, in a very short time, gives Harry his own key to the store. Now he can enter from any door he wants. And he doesn't take this privilege lightly. He sees it as a responsibility and permission to start taking initiative. He wastes no time implementing his innovative ideas, including eye-catching window displays that are turning the storefronts into theatrical spectacles. Harry has a keen understanding that shopping is as much about emotion as it is about practicality. By creating visually stunning displays, he's not only drawing customers into the store, but also creating a sense of wonder and excitement that lingered long after the customers left. This strategy was revolutionary at the time and laid the groundwork for the modern concept of experiential retail. Another of Harry's contributions in this phase of his blossoming career is his insistence on exceptional customer service. He champions the philosophy that the customer is always right, an approach that is both empowering for shoppers and profitable for the store. This mantra not only improves customer satisfaction at Marshall Field, but is rapidly cultivating loyalty as patrons feel valued and respected. Under Harry's influence, Marshall Fields is now becoming the place where customers are treated like royalty, a concept that would later become the hallmark of Selfridge's own retail empire. But we're not there yet. That milestone will come later in his life. In the meantime, he is officially a partner in this Marshall Field outfit, and he is making more money than he ever could have dreamed of. His high salary is allowing him to take care of his mother in a splendid fashion, and it's opening doors for him that he never could have walked through when he and his mother were scraping up just enough money to make ends meet. And because of his access to Chicago's high society, he also has access to the women in it. And one of them has caught his eye. Her name was Rosalie Buckingham. He calls her Rose. She's a socialite who was born into the right family, a family that gained its wealth by buying prime real estate in Chicago just before the city's boom. She's an accomplished artist, and she's pretty. Rose is his missing piece. He doesn't need her help to get money, but he needs her family's name in order to become a part of the elite society crowd. So he doesn't waste any time. He introduces himself. He is charming. She falls for him. They court. They like each other a lot. Well, he proposes to her and she says yes. Their wedding and receptions, yes with an S, are the biggest topics in the Chicago Tribune in 1890. They say their I do's on November 11th of that year, then go off to Mexico for their honeymoon. Their Christmas season is as merry as it can be, starting with an at-home on Christmas Day, then another one on New Year's Day, 1891. An at-home was a formal social gathering, typically held by wealthy individuals or families in their residence, where guests were invited to visit during set hours to socialize, enjoy refreshments, and demonstrate the hospitality and status of the hosts. This kind of event is right up Harry's alley because he's flashy and he loves showing off what he has worked for. So on their New Year's Day at home, Rose Selfridge wears all of her diamonds, $30,000 worth. That's like $1 million worth of diamonds today. And I can only imagine that Harry was smiling proudly from ear to ear as their guests got a glimpse into his exquisite home with its fine furnishings and his wife decked out like a real-life princess. How could this be his life? It was a result of his hard work, that's how. And it was now time for him to get back to it. Now he has a wife to take care of, and children will follow. So it's back to Marshall Fields. But it doesn't feel like a drag. Harry loves his work. He doesn't stop, and his mind doesn't stop. Marshall gives Harry the nickname Mile a Minute Harry. And even though it's not necessarily a compliment, Harry doesn't care. He knew that it was true. He kept coming up with great ideas on how to run the store. He's able to get these ideas because he sees what Marshall Field is doing. Marshall does not play games when it comes to customer service. Harry took note of a day when executors of a woman's estate came into the store to return a pair of the deceased lady's silk stockings. I don't know if 30-day returns with a receipt had been implemented at this time in retail history, but even if it had, this particular return was way past that 30-day period. The stockings had been purchased 28 years prior to the refund request, and Marshall Field refunded the full purchase price. That's how serious he was about his customers, and that made one heck of an impression on Harry. It is something that Harry takes on as his way of life. Then Harry has a bright idea. It's never been done before, but it sounds great in his head. What about putting a restaurant in the store? A place where women can socialize outside of their homes. He takes the idea to Marshall, and Marshall shoots it down. As Harry is learning what to do from Marshall, he's also learning what not to do. He doesn't want to be a carbon copy of Marshall Field. He just wants to steal his best practices. In Harry's mind, Marshall is doing everything right when it comes to his customers. But when it comes to his employees, he's got a lot of it wrong. Marshall never cracks a smile when he speaks to his employees. He rarely even pats them on the back for a job well done. Harry knows that if he ever gets the chance to run his own store, he'll be as kind to his workers as he is to his customers. As Harry is imagining his next what if, as in, what if I get to own my own store and encourage my employees to excel? Marshall Field fired one of his brilliant young partners for showing too much ambition. That partner is Harry Selfridge. Though he lets Harry go, he doesn't let all of Harry's ideas go. Eventually, Marshall changes his mind on the restaurant idea, and in 1907, he opens the South Grill inside of Marshall Fields. A little after opening it, he changes the name to the Walnut Room, which gives it a classier upgrade and acknowledges its Russian walnut lumber paneling. Well, let me tell you, that restaurant was the first of its kind, the first one opened in a department store, and it's still open today. Macy's acquired Marshall Fields in 2006, and over 100 years later, the eatery is still open for business. It stands as one of many testaments to the retail business genius of Harry Selfridge. But there's no need for Harry to cry about being let go. By the time he leaves Marshall Fields, he has risen to the position of senior manager, and it's all for the best anyway. Harry is not content to remain in someone else's shadow. He has larger ambitions, and his time at Marshall Fields has given him the tools, confidence, and finances to pursue them. His next move is a big move up in terms of his career, but just a short move away from Marshall Fields' department store geographically. In 1904, Harry sells his interest in Marshall Fields for $1.5 million and buys another store just a few blocks south of Marshall Fields. The existing 12-story store is called Schlesinger and Mayer. He names it Harry G. Selfridge and Company. So yes, there was a Selfridges in Chicago before the world-famous one in London. But Harry doesn't feel so great about his decision. In his mind, Marshall Field changed his life by giving him an opportunity. And the thought of being in competition with his mentor is something that doesn't allow Harry to sleep well at night. So he closes his store almost as soon as it opens and sells it for a pretty penny. Now Harry has enough money to retire and live the high life with his wife and their children. Rose gave birth to 5 children, but only 4 survived, 3 girls and 1 boy. What's a man to do when he retires as a millionaire? He travels the world, and that's what Harry is doing in 1904 and 1905. Here's how a story in a 1906 edition of the Inter-Ocean describes what happened next. Quote, "During his travels, Mr. Selfridge visited London and there saw an unusual opportunity for a great progressive department store run on American business methods. At the time, there existed no such houses in London. Conservative shops, specializing in only particular lines, showed customers what they wanted when they asked for it, but they made no attempt to advertise or display their goods, nor did they try to tempt people to purchase by allowing them to wander unmolested through the shops and look without obligation at the goods for sale." End quote. With this revelation before his eyes, Harry can't live the rest of his life retired. Now, Mile a Minute Harry is back, and he has an opportunity to do the business he loves, with the added benefit of being far, far away from his mentor. And it's a wrap. His mind is made up, and in 1906, he moves to London with a vision to create a revolutionary department store. His first years in London are not easy. Though there are no language barriers, he struggles with cultural barriers. Harry's norm is working every day, all throughout the day. Everyday people and successful businessmen in London are different and value rest in a way that Harry doesn't understand. So, after he raises the money that he needs to start construction on this great new store, it looks like he might have trouble hiring people to work in it when he dismisses the tradition of their afternoon tea. Once he realizes that no tea means no employees, he sees the light and allows tea and even welcomes tea. And now he can start filling positions at his grand Oxford Street shop. Then it finally happens. On March 15th, 1909, Selfridge's opens its doors for business. And not to go too far back in history, but I know that I can't be the only one who hears March 15th and thinks the Ides of March, the date on which Julius Caesar was assassinated, a date that was further immortalized by the somewhat known English writer William Shakespeare. This is a date that is forever associated with misfortune, doom, and gloom. I wonder if any of Harry's English business associates warned him about this grand opening date. Doom and gloom are on the way, but right now is the groundbreaking opening of this totally new shopping experience for Edwardian Londoners, and everyone is having a good time. Everyone except for Harry's competitors, that is, but we'll get to them later. Selfridge's is more than a department store. Harry has given London a shopping resort that is housed in a palace. Wide-eyed locals experienced for the first time in their lives open-plan displays, in-store art galleries, writing rooms, a post office, an information bureau. It was like having Google inside of your department store. Selfridge's also has a bargain basement. That was his invention. Harry may be the new kid on the block, but on his first day in business, he is running circles around his established competitors, putting them to shame. They are trying to keep up with Harry, but they can't. Harry Gordon Selfridge has them scared. There is no other way to say it. Harry has a line going down the block with people waiting to get in. Meanwhile, the rival merchants are scrambling, making their best attempts to divert traffic away from Selfridge's to their own shops. The Inter-Ocean got the cable about Harry's opening day, and they shared the next day that Selfridge's had thousands of people, mostly women, in the store just minutes after it opened. The total visitors by the end of the day was 150,000. His competitors, Harrods, Whiteley's, and John Lewis, to name a few, had spent small fortunes to get musical bands and even opera singers to perform at their shops on Harry's opening day. But their efforts did not pay off. London Underground cars had never seen so much traffic head to that end of Oxford Street as on the day of the grand opening of Selfridge's. Harry's store is a shopping paradise for women, and he is catering to them. In addition to everything that was there on opening day, he'll go on to add a rooftop garden, a restaurant like the one he had previously suggested to Marshall Field, powder rooms, and a reading room just for women. And though his store opened with a cosmetic counter, he would be the first retailer to put the counter at the entrance of his store, so that it would be easy for women to reach, and so that the smell of perfume would fill the entrance of the store instead of the smell of horse manure from the street. All of his success is owed to the fact that he caters to women. Coincidentally, that is also the reason for his downfall, and we're getting there. Now, it can't be more clear that Harry's first day of business was spectacular. But I promised you that we were in for a roller coaster ride. And here's where it really begins. While things on the business front are on the way up, things on the marital front are on the way down. And it's all Harry's fault. At the time of the store opening, Harry is also involved in some leg opening. And those legs don't belong to his wife. They belong to Siri Bernardo, who was his mistress from 1909 to 1912. Siri is the daughter of a philanthropist named Thomas Bernardo, and she is the wife of pharmaceutical magnate Henry Wellcome. Her marriage to him is ending as things start heating up between herself and Harry. Now, I gotta say, I don't know what her husband was expecting from her. She was 22 and he was 48. Okay, let me rephrase that. I do know what he was expecting from her. The same thing that Harry was. Well, eventually her husband divorces her and leaves her with not a whole lot of money. Luckily for Siri, there's nothing that Harry loves more than a damsel in distress, especially if he can throw some money at her troubles and be the man that she can lean on. He loves to play the hero. Oh yeah, you're going to see that Harry gets high off of giving his mistresses his money. So when Siri comes a-running to Big Daddy Harry, he is there for her. As long as her legs are open to him, his wallet is open to her. He gives her money and the lease of a beautiful home in York Terrace West. Just as all of this is happening, Rose, Harry's wife, remember her? I don't know if you did because it seems like he didn't. Anyway, Rose is taking a trip back home to Chicago. Now, right around this time that Siri is moving into her new home. It was a very quick trip for Rose. The newspapers reported on how expensive the trip was for such a short stay, noting that the Selfridges must have had a lot of money for her to be able to take such a costly trip that's so short. Maybe Harry's affair with Siri was part of the reason, or the only reason why Rose took this trip, to get away from the embarrassment that her husband was causing her. I can't know for sure. You know how it was for women who were married to powerful men who cheated. Sometimes, those women had to shut their mouths and endure. And why were the papers only marveling at the wealth of the Selfridges? Was it to avoid mentioning the scandal everyone knew but did not dare to print? After all, Rose was but a woman and Harry was a powerful man. Was this affair of his merely the price that Rose had to pay for being married to such a keen businessman? Well, Harry's affair with Siri is on and off for about 3 years. And in the second year of his affair with Siri, he manages to squeeze in another mistress. Imagine that. Harry is cheating on Siri. The woman is Eleanor Glenn. She was involved with this guy named George Curzon. George was an earl who had been the son-in-law of Levi Leiter. Remember that name? He is the Leiter of Field and Leiter, the original Marshall Field department store. And if his marriage to Leiter's daughter is sounding like one of those American Dollar Princess stories to you, it should, because it is one. George was born into this aristocratic family that had no money, so he married Leiter's daughter for her money. Now, he's ready to end his romance with Eleanor Glenn in 1910, but she owes him money. Guess who paid that money for her? Harry Selfridge. He loves to help a pretty lady who needs some cash. Their affair doesn't last long, but maybe it was fun. I did find this news story that shows that they traveled on the RMS Olympic on the same voyage. The Olympic is one of Titanic's sister ships. The Vanderbilts were on this trip as well. You can see that Harry's and Eleanor's names aren't together, So I can't say for sure that they shared a cabin and got inappropriate, but I can't say that they didn't, and I wouldn't put anything past Harry. But that's enough of Eleanor. We gotta get back to Siri. As things are starting to cool off with her, Harry slowly shuts off his phones, but opens some doors for her, giving her contacts to start her interior design business. By the time he's completely done with Siri, she has moved on to 2 more men, one of whom she married. And now Harry is cheating on his wife and his mistress again, this time with the French showgirl Gabi Daly. And in case you're one of those people who hates mistresses, side chicks, concubines, know that Siri's romantic life did not end up so great. She married a gay author who hated her, even after she died. Her husband was Somerset Maugham. And he wasn't a big fan of Harry either, because Somerset didn't know that Harry was still giving her money when she had moved on to him. Somerset felt like a fool. But that's old news to Harry. Now the year is 1912 and Selfridge's is thriving. It is one of London's premier shopping destinations. It's an uphill climb for Harry, no doubt, but he is succeeding and hushing the noise from his local competitors who are saying that Harry's efforts to Americanize British merchandising methods will fail. Successful men sometimes say that having the right woman at your side can contribute to your success. Well, Harry has his wife and a spare, so there's no wonder why business at Selfridge's is booming. Selfridge's is not just a place to shop. It's a place to socialize, relax, and maybe even run into your favorite celebrity. And if your favorite celebrity stops by, there's a big chance that Harry is going to have him or her sign his window. Harry has this plate glass window in his office that's called the signature window. If you're noteworthy, Harry invites you to his office so that you can sign it with his diamond-pointed stylus. The names of some of the world's most famous and interesting people are on this window. It has the autographs of Rudolph Valentino, Amelia Earhart, Prince George, Duke of Kent, Ethel Barrymore, Drew Barrymore's great-aunt, the Dolly sisters, Vivian Lee, Isadora Duncan, Will Rogers, Anna Pavlova, Prince George of Russia, Eleanor Glenn, and Gabi Daly. You know that those last 2 names are a couple of his mistresses. But Harry slept with at least 3 of those people whose names I just rattled off. I bet that his wife wanted to smash that window to pieces. After all, part of its purpose, whether intentional or not, is to memorialize his sexual trysts. And a lot of the women who signed were merely famous women who didn't cause any trouble in Harry's marriage. Gabi Daly signed the window, but she did cause some trouble in his marriage. Let me tell you about her. Gabi is a French showgirl. She's a dancer and just the kind of babe that Harry Selfridge likes. Beautiful, loose, and popular. He loves famous women. He loves being in the in crowd. Now, Gabi has a reputation for a lot of things. She's the toast of London during World War I, and it was this known thing that she had a fee that men paid to take her out on dates. And it's not going to take long for Harry to pay more than all of those desperate men combined. So, it's some work day in 1912. After a hard day at Selfridge's, Harry heads down to the Palace Theatre on Shaftesbury Avenue. The live show he's watching is Mademoiselle Chic. The star of the show is Gabi. Most of her reviews say that she doesn't have a lot of talent, but Harry thinks that she's great. In this particular show, she strips down to her underwear. Harry is blown away. Damn what those critics think. This girl has got it. As a matter of fact, he's so convinced by her nearly nude act that he takes it upon himself to buy this young lady some clothes. Yes, Harry invites Gabi to Selfridge's to give her a guided tour and allow her to pick out some items that she can wear. Because Harry is, just a good guy who wants to help. And he continues to help Gabi for the next few years. He's lavishing her with expensive gifts. And I'm not talking about designer shoes and handbags and clothes. Well, not just those things. Harry is going all out. Rubies, sapphires, emeralds, pearls, diamonds, whatever she wants from Harry, she gets. Meanwhile, Rose is at home, turning a blind eye, but there's only so many times that she can turn her head till she can't help but see. Harry is obsessed with Gabi, and he's being very public and very sloppy about his open affection towards her. He's out with Gabi in public, spending nights at her shows, leaving Rose and their 4 children without a husband and father for days at a time. You know that Rose has to be embarrassed. But then, instead of coming to his senses and trying to make things right with his family, Harry does the total opposite when he not leases but purchases a stately home in Kensington for Gabi. He pays £50,000 for it. Let's be clear, Harry is not just buying her a house. He's putting Gabi in high style. Kensington is one of the most affluent neighborhoods in London. He is making a statement and damn near marking his territory with his purchase. £50,000 in 1912 is like $7.7 million today. That's a lot more than the trinkets that men of means typically give their mistresses. Gabi spends her time in the public eye, making it clear that her affection is for sale. And Harry, who loves to win, is proud to be the highest bidder. Not only does Harry buy her this exquisite home, he furnishes it completely, and all of the furnishings come from Selfridge's. And his trucks have his company logo, so again, I can't state enough just how public and sloppy this whole situation was. His trucks were pulling into Gabi's driveway at a steady pace to keep loading up her house with all of the finest wares from his 150 departments at Selfridge's. The neighbors know. The whole city knows. Harry is embarrassing his family, but he's too blinded by his love for Gabi to see it or to care about it. While Harry is making these decisions all on his own, Gabi is no angel in the situation. It's Harry's decision to cheat, but she also knows that he's a married man with children. But as long as he's paying her way, she doesn't care. She's happy to be his lover. She's happy about the attention that they're getting, even if it makes her look like a woman who lacks character. And for Harry, the money is pouring in left, right, and center from Selfridge's. So he just wants to be the good guy and share with the woman he loves. His generosity knows no bounds. Neither does Rose's frustration and embarrassment. This husband of hers is spending the next few years of their married life sending Selfridge's delivery trucks to Gabi's house almost daily. Those trucks are loaded with the best that his store has to offer. Delicacies from all over the world, huge quantities of the finest wines and champagnes and flowers. He loves to send Gabi enormous bouquets of roses. Roses. His wife's name is Rose. How can he not stop and think about the mother of his children as he's carrying on like this? And guess what else? On the rare days that he's not having his finest merchandise delivered to Gabi, she's coming into the store. Well, because she needs to visit her sweet Harry and she needs to shop. She picks out the best and most expensive items she sees and buys them on credit. And she charges all of this stuff to Harry's account. Month after month, he smiles and foots the bill. Kind of makes you wonder how he's going to end up with no money at the end of this story, right? His actions are nothing short of disgraceful. But here's the biggest stunt he pulls for Gabi, and if this doesn't scream obsession, I don't know what does. Gabi complains to Harry, "Honey, my garden is a mass of tangled weeds, and that makes me so sad." Perhaps she only had time to be a hoe and not use one. But she doesn't need to lift one finger because Harry is a good guy who cares about women. You can say that he is a rake who doesn't know how to use one. But he has enough money to hire all of the rakes and hoes that it will require to get rid of those weeds for his sweet, precious Gabi. But he goes beyond that. After Gabi made that complaint to Harry, she wakes up the next morning, looks out of her window to see that not only are all of the weeds gone, but spring is in full blossom in her yard. Her lawn is covered in an array of spring flowers, daffodils, pansies, azaleas, and tulips, you name it. If the flower exists, it's there in her garden. Harry created a springtime miracle that happened in the dead of the night thanks to his floral department and the overtime that he paid them. So, one more point for Big Daddy Harry, I guess. But when it comes to Gabi and the rest of his mistresses, he is playing the short game, and he's playing to lose. Harry's feeling like the big man at the moment. He's feeling confident about getting next to the women that men can only dream of. And I'm sure that the steamy sex with these women is another big plus for him too. But with each affair and with each grand gesture for these women who are not his wife, he is chipping away at his own reputation and putting his family in a very vulnerable position. So yeah, he gets to be seen as a certified playboy, but Londoners fell in love with him because he was a family man who just happened to be great at his business. Now they're starting to see him as a great shop owner who is indulgent and reckless when it comes to his marriage. His critics, who counted him as a failure even before his grand opening, are now using his actions to bolster their original arguments about him. His public affairs and the visible trail of Selfridge's branded delivery trucks outside of Gabi's home are proof to his rivals that Harry's personal indiscretions are making his place of business bad for the city. So now Harrods and Whiteleys are taking subtle shots at Dirty Harry, advertising their own stores as respectable, without saying, because who wants to spend their money with a dirty adulterer? Crikey. And poor Rose, who at this time is facing immense social pressure and scrutiny. Victorian and Edwardian ideals of marriage were rigid, placing the burden of maintaining a family's dignity on the woman, even if her husband was the one who strayed. You know how it goes. She must not be taking care of him if he needed to look somewhere else for affection. There's not much for her to do but suffer in quiet dignity. Even divorce is likely not an option because divorcing a man as powerful as Harry is going to cause yet another scandal. And that's something that Rose simply cannot handle. Harry's self-centeredness is shining through. When you think of the fact that part of Rose's appeal to him was her high society family name, and that with each affair he has, he's just dragging her family name and his own through the mud. Harry's inability to control his impulses is eroding their marriage. But right now, all that he can see is Gabi. Well, that's until he sees Gabrielle Ray. Yep, he's already got his eyes on his next tart. But before I get to her, just in case you think that Gabi deserves some karmic retribution for her part in Harry's extramarital affair, here's what happened to her. She died. Not right away, but a few years after the end of her relationship with Harry. Gabi contracted Spanish influenza. She underwent several surgeries for a throat infection, but passed away on February 11th, 1920. The kicker is that she likely could have survived, but this woman, who lived off of her beauty her whole life, demanded that her surgeons not cut her in a way that would leave any scars, especially on her neck. After her death, Gabi and Harry appeared on the same news pages 2 more times. Once on Valentine's Day 1920, when Harry is in the news for having an explorer's boat on display at Selfridge's. Gabi's last will and testament is the talk that day. Then, a few days later on the 18th, Harry makes the news because he's leasing Lansdowne House, the residence of Lord Lansdowne, and it is a grand mansion. Gabi makes the news because her bedstead was sold. Most likely, it was one of Harry's many purchases for her. It was gilded, painted in gold, and snatched a price of the equivalent of $25,000 today. This short news brief gives us another glimpse into Harry's out-of-control spending. When all was said and done, the contents of Gabi's house raised as much as Harry had paid for the house. Let's get back to Gabrielle Ray. I'm sure that you won't be surprised to learn that this new girlfriend of his was a dancer and an actress who was widely known for her beauty. She's another one of many who are just his type. And it's more of the same story. He spends a little less money and less time with this one, but the public humiliation that Rose endures is just the same. Harry quickly moves on from Gabrielle to the next one, and of course, just like the mistresses that came before her, she knew that Harry was a married man. So if you believe that cheaters get what's coming to them in the end, you might not be surprised to learn that Gabrielle got married and then her husband cheated on her. And she didn't take it well at all. She begged him to come back to her, and when he refused, she fell into a deep depression and turned to alcohol to help her cope. Gabrielle spent the last 37 years of her life in a mental institution. Harry moves on to the next girl, but in between affairs, he finds a little time to be a businessman. This whole while, business is booming as his mottos, business as usual and meet me at Selfridge's, are catching on in London. And he even finds time to do the family thing for a moment when he returns, with his wife, to Chicago for Rosalie's debutante ball. Rosalie is their oldest daughter, and she is named after her mother. The family's trip to Chicago is a short one, and now, with that pesky family business out of the way, Harry can focus his attention on his next lover. A dancer, but a different kind of dancer. This one's not a showgirl, but she's still the toast of the town. She's the Russian prima ballerina, Anna Pavlova. At the time that Harry takes an interest in her, she's practically world famous. No surprises there. Harry likes what other people like. He wants the women who other men want. But those other men don't own a world-famous store like Harry does. So when Anna comes to town and Harry meets her after a private performance, it's quite easy for our charming Harry to invite her to his store. And you know what comes next. Trunks full of expensive presents for Anna, days of degradation for Rose, and lots of content for public gossip in the city. But Harry can say that their relationship is strictly business because by this time, he has developed a reputation for promoting the arts at his store. I can't help but wonder if Harry's interest in dance was genuine or just an excuse to get pretty dancers into his store to see him. Perhaps it was a bit of both. And yes, Anna knew that Harry was married. He was just as famous as she was. And I don't know if you want to call this karma or not, but I can say that her death had a strange similarity to Gabi's. Remember that she didn't want to be cut because she didn't want to lose her beauty? Well, Anna got sick with pneumonia and needed an operation. Doctors told her that she wouldn't be able to dance after the surgery. She's quoted as replying to the doctors, "If I can't dance, I'd rather be dead." Now, remember those names of people who signed the signature window? I told you that a few of the additional names belonged to Harry Splings. Anna Pavlova is in that number. There's a 50-50 chance on whether Anna's manager approved of the time she spent with Harry. Her manager was Solomon Hurock, and he was either very angry with Harry for sleeping with 2 of the talents on his roster, or he may have introduced Harry to the ladies because Harry's next girlfriend is also one of his clients. She is the mother of modern dance. She is Isadora Duncan. Harry actually met her before he owned his great store. He met her in Chicago when he was working at Marshall Field's. Isadora was in the early stages of her career. Her mother was taking her from one theater to the next to auditions in the hopes of booking steady work. When a music hall manager expressed his interest in giving her a shot, Isadora needed the right costume to make a good impression, but she and her mother were down to their last dollars. Well, they walked into Marshall Field's and explained their predicament to a young Harry Selfridge, who ended up letting them buy everything that Isadora needed on store credit, and she was able to book her job. Fast forward to the 1910s, and she meets the older, married Harry Selfridge in London. He gets to see her perform, and there is a lot less to her costumes now. Harry is loving the lack of material she's wearing. I think that by now, you get the pattern. He rolls out the red carpet for her, gives her the full celebrity treatment at his store, buys her a lot of nice things, makes a spectacle of his relationship with her, and of course, he has to get Isadora to sign his autograph window. Rose is somewhere in the background, getting more and more fed up with her husband's antics, but she won't have to worry about Isadora for too long. Thankfully for Rose, Harry is ready to give up dancers, but not mistresses. His attention turns to a socialite next, Lady Victoria Sackville West. As for Isadora, she went on to live a life that was beyond sad. She had 3 children, 2 who died very young when their nanny took them out for a ride and accidentally drove the car into the Seine River. A few years later, Isadora had another child who died shortly after birth. She spent her last years struggling financially and running up debts at hotels, trying her best to maintain her grand lifestyle. While out on a drive in Nice with a French-Italian male companion, Isadora was wearing a beautiful scarf. It was draped around her neck and blowing in the wind. Then it got tangled up in the wheel well and broke her neck, practically decapitating her. That was in 1927. Now, Harry goes through a whole chorus line's worth of mistresses in the 1910s, many overlapping to the point where his mistresses feel like they're being cheated on with his other mistresses. There's an actress named Eva Warwick. Her stage performances are underwhelming, but she's a 10 in the looks department. Quick side note, if you happened to watch the Mr. Selfridge series, you probably can't help but remember the character Ellen Love. She's a fictitious character, but a very good representation of Harry's kind of girl. Imagine about 10 more of these types from 1910 to 1918, and you get the picture. Now let's rewind just a little bit to 1915. We're with Harry and his newest love, Lady Victoria Sackville West. His department store is as busy as ever. He understands the power of the press, and he is spending a lot of money on aggressive advertising campaigns. And he's spending just as much on his mistresses. And this new one is an aristocrat, even if her background isn't squeaky clean. Harry knows that he'll need to spend some money to impress her. Lady Victoria is the beautiful, illegitimate daughter of the second Baron Sackville and his Spanish mistress, Pepita de Oliva, a dancer. It sounds like Lady Victoria has found a man who is just like her daddy. Harry's meeting Victoria is inevitable. Her social standing and his net worth put them in the same social circles. These two are both flamboyant and love a lot of attention, and they get it. And you already know, that's good for Harry's ego, but bad for his business and his family. Well, Victoria loves luxurious things, and Harry loves giving luxurious things. They would be a perfect match if he didn't have a wife and children at home. But that hasn't stopped Harry so far, and it's not stopping him now. Actually, this affair is slightly less scandalous because Victoria is a proper aristocratic lady and not some naked showgirl. Yeah, so this affair is classy. But that doesn't make the relationship any less gossip-worthy. People continue to talk, and Harry continues to cheat. Eventually, Lady Victoria comes to her senses and marries her cousin. I know that sounds weird, but don't worry. It's her first cousin, so everything's okay. And this move makes her the lady of one of England's grandest estates, Knole House. And wouldn't you know it, her husband is a cheater. He has affair after affair after affair. And he's even more open about his mistresses than Harry. And Lady Victoria is not made of the tough stuff that Rose Selfridge is. She's not built for this. She's begging him to stop, and he won't. He's bringing his mistresses home and having his way with them right in front of her. I wonder if Victoria ever thought about how Rose Selfridge must have felt as all of this is happening to her. Oh well. Time is marching on, and so is Selfridge's. Harry Selfridge, despite all of his shortcomings and public indiscretions, is heralded as the Prince of Retail. He is using his store to promote cultural events and exhibits. He is doing whatever it takes to draw a crowd, and everything that he is doing is working. He's the first British merchant of his kind to sell ice cream in his shop, and he installs a soda fountain, also a first there. He has managed to make Selfridge's an experience, not just a shopping destination. He's catering to every customer at every price point. And for the women who couldn't purchase his expensive items when they were in season, his bargain basement is there, allowing them affordable, easy access to the goods they want. To be honest, Harry's penis belongs in his bargain basement because anyone who wants some can get it. There's no time to go into the details of every affair that he has, and there's no reason. You see that they're pretty much all the same. But what makes his affair with Lady Victoria special, for lack of a better word, is that while Harry is with her, some major fires are going on at home. For one, Harry's middle daughter is engaged to a man who is clearly not a suitable match. The other problem is even bigger, and it's to do with Rose. In addition to being sick of his infidelity and carelessness, she's sick. Just plain sick. And dying. You see, while Harry is having a grand old time with his lovers, World War I is going on in the background. Harry originally leased Highcliffe Castle as a retreat for his family, but it has become a place where Rose and his daughters are contributing to the war effort by caring for wounded soldiers. This is the work that is keeping Rose busy while the town is gossiping about Harry's dalliances with showgirls. And something else is going on in the background of this story where Harry is the main character and everyone around him is either a supporting character or a prop at his disposal. That something else is the Spanish flu. The Great Flu of 1918, Purple Death, whatever you want to call it. Rose spent her last days pouring her heart and soul into caring for the wounded soldiers at Highcliffe. News sources even reported that she overworked herself, and it's in this period that she is exposed to the Spanish flu. Her health declined rapidly, Then she, like many of the millions who had contracted this fatal illness, also developed pneumonia as a complication of the flu, and she died from it. Maybe if Harry had known that Rose was going to die so soon, he would not have had the sexual affair with Lady Victoria. Maybe he would have penciled those months in his schedule for Rose and Rose alone. But that may have been too hard for him. If there is a silver lining to her death, it's that her sickness didn't last long. She passed away only days after getting sick. Harry will no longer be able to embarrass her. He goes on to tell the press that this is one of the greatest blows of his life. So what does this mean for Harry? That he'll straighten up and fly right? That he'll cherish the time he has left with his children and mother and be a stand-up figure for them? He changes his actions, but for the worse. Harry is about to get downright reckless with his behavior. He'll go on to live his life embarrassing Rose's legacy, and their children, and himself, and his business. I mean, he says that he's devastated by her death, and he really is, but not enough to truly change his ways. Family becomes more important to him in his grieving process, but in a way that seems selfish. He becomes closer to his daughters and his mother now, but it's because he's relying on them for emotional support. Even his financial recklessness, which is already out of control, is getting ready to escalate in the wake of his wife's passing. Maybe that's the other silver lining to Rose's passing. Her death, untimely as it was, may have spared her from witnessing the complete collapse of Harry's finances and reputation in his later years. Because I have to be clear with you, that's where this story is heading. It's such a sad ending for Rose, who likely had high hopes for her marriage when she and Harry were young lovers in Chicago. But then she moves to London, betting everything on Harry and supporting his big dream. His department store where his number one goal is to cater to women. And he does it so well. He built his empire catering to women, but didn't do the same for the woman he vowed to cherish in holy matrimony. Instead of getting the treatment that Harry would gladly give a female customer who wants to buy a coat, Rose lived through years of being neglected by her husband. While Harry's mistresses came and went, Rose bore the brunt of his betrayals, steadfastly preserving her family's dignity amid the storm of scandal. Everything that he had touched and created was tainted, right down to his autograph window. That same window that memorialized Harry's brilliance as a businessman also became an unintentional ledger of his indiscretions. Names etched in glass like chapters in a scandalous novel. I wonder how Rose felt seeing it when she would visit the store on the days that he needed to display his family man persona. The emotional toll of living in Harry's orbit was a price that all of the women connected to him had to pay. They were left to grapple with the emotional wreckage of their lives while he moved on seemingly unscathed. And when I say that this was the case for all of the women in Harry's life, that's what I mean. Even his own daughters couldn't outrun the reputational damage caused by their father. Their own marriages mirrored traces of the union between their father and mother. But we'll get into that and so much more in part 2. But before you go, please answer this question for me. Of all of Harry's mistresses you've heard about so far, whose story do you think was the most outrageous or disrespectful to his family? Please tell me in the comments. I can't wait to read your thoughts. Coming up next is Harry's catastrophic fall from grace, when his business takes a hit from two forces that even Harry wasn't prepared to take on: the Great Depression and the Dolly sisters. Now, in his defense, there was nothing that he could have done to stop the Great Depression. He, along with everyone else in the world, had to suffer through that nightmare. But when it came to the tantalizing Dolly sisters, Harry wasn't suffering at all. One of them was draining his bank account dry, and he was loving every minute of it. I'll see you shortly to tell you the rest of that story. Until then, I think that it goes without saying that some women can be just as reckless about spending money in the name of love as Harry Selfridge was. Barbara Woolworth Hutton was one of those women. Her grandfather, Frank Winfield Woolworth, was good friends with Harry Selfridge, and he was the founder of the Woolworth Five and Dime stores that allowed him to leave a fortune to Barbara that she spent on men trying to buy their love. The Mr. Selfridge television show had a couple of scenes with Mr. Woolworth, and I told Barbara's story on this channel, and you can see it here. I will also leave links to it in the description box and pinned comment of this video. I hope that you have enjoyed this tale so far. If you love these scandalous stories from history that make Ty's Hot Mess History a time capsule for the culture, hit subscribe and the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Give this video a thumbs up. It's free and helps a ton. Whether you're watching or listening, thank you for letting me be a part of your day.
Remember to check out their special offer for you in the description box and pinned comment.
This video has been brought to you by me. Well, me and my new YouTube channel, Verified YouTube Guide. Are you just starting your YouTube journey and feeling overwhelmed? Don't worry, I've got you covered. My channel, Verified YouTube Guide, is your go-to resource for practical, step-by-step tips to grow and monetize your channel. It's literally follow-along video tutorials. I'm showing you the steps I took to get 180,000 subscribers on YouTube. So if you don't know how to do something, you can just copy my work one step at a time. From setting up your channel to showing you how you can earn money at any stage on YouTube. And I'm not just talking about YouTube ad revenue. If you have something important to say or a service to sell, start talking about it on YouTube now. Don't wait. Subscribe to Verified YouTube Guide today, and let's build your channel together. You don't have to figure this out alone. The link is in the description box. I'll see you there.